Deadly Desire is back. It's been a few weeks, but thank you so much for joining us for Fox 5 special coverage of the Brendan Banfield murder trial. Today, sentencing day for the au pair connected to the plan to carry out the murders of Brendan Banfield's wife and another man. She was back in court today to learn her fate. Also back in court today, our man on the inside, Bob Barnard, joining us now live from Northern Virginia. Bob, it's been a few weeks, but this case still gripping attention, and today was interesting, Bob, because it didn't exactly go according to what I think the plan was for Juliana Magalhaes.
That's right, Chris, and it was very emotional. I mean, there were a lot of tears in the courtroom today from Juliana herself, and you'll hear some of that shortly, but also from Joseph Ryan's mother, who appeared via video link. She wasn't actually in the courtroom today, but also an aunt of Joseph Ryan's. There were a number of Christine Banfield's relatives there today who had hoped to be able to read their victim impact statements to the judge. But because what Juliana pled guilty to was the one count of manslaughter for Joseph Ryan's death, Judge Penny Azcarate said no victim impact statements related to Christine Banfield, because technically Juliana was not being sentenced for her murder. But as you mentioned, going into the hearing today, and even expressed at the beginning of the hearing, was this, they called it, Juliana's attorney called it an agreement. The judge kept saying, no, this is just a recommendation, but it was this agreement between the Commonwealth's attorneys and Juliana's attorney that she would be sentenced to time served. She's been in jail for a little more than 2 years and 5 months or so since she was originally arrested in this case. And so I think her expectation, because it's what the Commonwealth's attorney had agreed to, was that she might be getting out in the next couple of days and be kind of turned over to the Fairfax County Sheriff to work with ICE to send her back to Brazil. And she could go on her merry way and maybe make some money telling her story to these independent TV producers that she's already been in touch with. But Judge Penny Azcarate, who at the very beginning of this trial, when they were selecting a jury, and the judge was telling the prospective jurors that this thing could go on for 4 weeks, and a lot of them raised their hands saying that would be a problem, that'd be a conflict. She kept saying, nope. That's not an excuse, not an excuse. She was a tough cookie then, and she was a tough cookie today, because despite this agreement that she kept calling just a recommendation of time served for Juliana Magalhaes, the au pair in this case, the judge said, no, I'm going to give you the max, 10 years. And so you could hear she was kind of going that way before she actually handed down the sentence. And you could see the body movement. I was a few rows behind the family members, the Banfield and Ryan family members that were in the courtroom. But you could also hear gasp, like, oh, my goodness, like she's not going to slap this young lady on the wrist and let her go. And sure enough, she said it's 10 years. And interesting, her attorney, Juliana's attorney, Chris, afterward, Ryan Campbell is his name, was telling reporters that, look, the way the system goes, she'll have to serve at least 65% of that sentence. She's already been in for 2 years and 5 months. So she could get out in 4 years, but she was sentenced to 10 years instead of time served.
Yeah, and I think, what you have told us from the beginning, Bob, was that this judge was no nonsense. And so not a major surprise, I think, that she decided to throw the book at her. I know you have sound from Juliana speaking on her own behalf. So let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
Sure.
I lost myself in a relationship, leaving my morals and values behind, and putting even my loved ones through this. My time in jail has been a time of reflection for me, to better myself in more ways than I realized I needed. I had to find myself again. That's when I truly found God, when I had lost the desire to live, when I wanted to die. The guilt and feelings that I didn't deserve to live and that I was a monster were overwhelming. In God, I found the forgiveness and mercy, and I am restored. Jail is not a place you can bear to let yourself drown in those feelings. I wanted to disconnect from my pain and the guilt and get into survival mode to stay mentally sane, because inevitably With memories come pain. Yet, I know I will live with this for the rest of my life. God and I only know the shame and guilt and sorrow I carry for all I have caused. Sorry for Joe's family and Christine's family. Sorry for Valerie, an innocent little girl who has so much love that will grow without her mother and our father. This I have burden to carry, knowing I could have prevented it at all from happening.
You hear it there. The judge was really not buying it. The judge said you showed no remorse, and that you could have stopped this thing at any time. You'll hear from the judge in a minute. But Chris, we also heard from Joseph Ryan's mother, a woman named Deirdre Fisher, who I believe was coming from her home in Florida via video. And so before the judge handed down the sentence, and you'll hear that in a moment, and actually it was before Juliana got up there and tearfully said this, we heard the tears coming from Joseph Ryan's mom. And again, he was the man who was lured into the house by Juliana and Brendan Banfield so they could set him up as the fall guy for the murder, the ultimate target being Christine Banfield, Brendan Banfield's wife, who was the employer of Juliana, and their daughter, who she referenced, was the reason she was in the house. And things went haywire. And obviously, a lot of sadness to go around, but here was this Joseph Ryan, Chris, brought into this mix, and his mother had a chance to speak to the judge before the sentencing today as well.
I lost my peace and sense of well-being. I can never unhear Joe's moans and cries after he was shot, the cries of a dying man. I can never unsee the image of his lifeless, bloody hand from the trial images. I lost nearly all my friends who couldn't handle dealing with someone lost in grief or understand why my life can't just go on. I lost the chance to ever be called grandma. So many sleepless nights. So many nightmares of his brutal murder and fear, confusion, and of the pain he must have felt. So many screams and guttural cries into my pillow, feeling the loss of my son.
There again, Chris, very dramatic testimony from Deirdre Fisher, who's Joseph Ryan's mother. And again, Joseph Ryan's aunt also spoke. And it was interesting. One of the things they talked about, the aunt said that when Joseph Ryan was born, his mother and father, biological parents, were very young. So he was actually raised by his paternal grandfather and mother, grandfather and grandmother, but obviously had a relationship with his mother as well. And I mean, there's a lot we could talk about, but if you'd like, Chris, let's go ahead and play the final verdict, if you will, coming down from Judge Penny Ascarati, again, who was, a stickler for time and order throughout this trial of Brendan Banfield, which just ended a couple of weeks ago, and now back in court today to sentence Juliana Magalhaes.
I have watched your interviews and I watched you testify, and I just cannot find any further mitigation factors for your case. You may not have come up with a plan, agreed, and an older man may have groomed you to a point, but I want to list for the record the facts that I cannot equate with accepting a time-served recommendation. These are aggravating factors either not fully captured or not reflected in the sentencing guidelines. Number one, until today, you have shown no empathy for the victim in this case. Number two, you were more involved with the plan than you testified to. First off, there were numerous postings on social media platforms and text platforms looking for a target, texting and speaking directly with Joseph Ryan, encouraging him to bring the knife, and ultimately through the phone conversation, getting his consent, knowing all along you were bringing him to his death. lying to Christine and setting up the plan for the zoo, using her devices and hiding her phone, using a child as a pawn in your plan, waiting outside for Joseph to show up, calling Mr. Banfield to bring him to the scene, and at any point for at least the month prior or that day, you could have stopped this. The plan did not work without your full involvement. Number 3, having the loaded firearm in your pocket. Number 4, bringing a child into the basement knowing 2 people were about to be murdered, to include the child's mother. Number 5, hearing Christine ask you to call 911, which you did, and then immediately hung up. Number 6, seeing Joseph Bryan, who was shot in the head at that time, still moving and walking up to him as he lay moaning on the floor and shooting him point blank in the heart. Number 7, watching as Mr. Banfield stabbed Christine over and over again. Number 8, waiting 15 minutes before recalling 911. Number 9, telling a fabricated story for over a year and a half, a story that depicted Joseph Ryan wrongly as a rapist and a murderer, an innocent man. And number 10, telling the child it was okay to call you mommy hours after the murder. Your actions were deliberate, self-serving, and demonstrated a profound disregard for human life. So let's get it straight. You do not deserve anything other than incarceration and a life of reflection on what you have done to the victim and this family. May it weigh heavily on your soul. So today I'm sentencing you on a manslaughter charge because that's what's before me. And the facts of this case demonstrate an intentional and calculated level of violence that is the most serious manslaughter scenario that this court has ever seen. Therefore, I do sentence you to 10 years in the penitentiary.
And there you have it. You could see Juliana nodding her head. She was sobbing throughout because she testified, read her statement, Chris, right before the judge delivered the sentence. So we weren't sure if she was still kind of shaking from, the emotions of speaking aloud in court, in a sense, bearing her soul, or if she was nodding her head in agreement, like, yeah, Judge, you're right. I deserve this.
Bob, and the judge came with all the receipts laying out those 10 details that she thought were not accounted for in the sentencing agreement that she didn't necessarily have to follow. That's why she went, the recommendation versus the agreement that had been worked out ahead of time. And it also sounds like if the prosecution had not cut that deal with her, that judge thinks she may have deserved more, or at least a more serious charge against her than manslaughter, calling it one of the most serious manslaughter charges she had ever seen. Bob, looking ahead to the next step in this case for Brendan Banfield, not sure whether he's privy to any sort of the information that happened today, but this bodes for him that the most stiff sentence possible could be coming his way as well.
Yeah, Chris, and basically, I'm no lawyer. We've spoken to a bunch. Brendan Banfield's lawyer, John Carroll, was in the courtroom. So whether Brendan hears all this, his attorney certainly did. He was there listening to this, sitting in the courtroom with the rest of us. But if I'm not mistaken, because he was convicted of 2 counts of aggravated murder, I believe the sentence is required that he serve life in prison. There is no longer the death penalty in the Commonwealth of Virginia. A lot of people might be confused by that because one of the snipers, John Allen Muhammad, was put to death, almost 20 years ago here in Virginia for his role in that sniper case. But since then, the General Assembly in Virginia has outlawed the death sentence. So the most that Brendan Banfield can get is life in prison, but it's almost certain that that's what he's going to get. And yeah, you heard Judge Benny Ascarati as far as the au pair Juliana Magalhaes is concerned, that, yeah, she got a plea deal with the Commonwealth's attorney to plead guilty to manslaughter, which carried this maximum 10 years, because the Commonwealth needed her testimony to nail the main guy, Brendan Banfield. But you heard the judge say, look, you were originally charged with second-degree murder. That was like something like potentially 30 years in prison. So almost the sense you get from the judge is, I understand why this agreement or recommendation was reached between the Commonwealth's attorney and Juliana Magalhaes to have her plead guilty to a lesser charge and testify against Brendan Banfield. But the judge, who was not really party to that, was like, I'm stuck with this manslaughter conviction, but you're getting the max.
All right, Bob, when will we be back in court for Brendan Banfield's sentencing?
That is May 8th. So
8th.
coming up February, March, April, May, just under 3 months from now.
All right. Well, we look forward to your recap that day as well. For anyone who wants updates on this case or to revisit it from the beginning, you can check it out on Fox Local, Fox 5 DC's YouTube page, and of course, streaming on Fox 5's TikTok page. Bob Barnard, thank you for everything. We'll see you next time in May when Brendan Banfield is sentenced.